we're making focaccia, classic Italian bread. It can be used for so many different things, as an appetizer, as a sandwich bread, as something that you serve alongside an antipasta plate. There's just so many options with it. And the great thing too is that it's customizable. So today I would like to put some chopped rosemary on top of my focaccia, but we got to make the dough first. So we'll discuss toppings a little bit later, but how do we start the dough? Now I have all my ingredients here, and we are using instant yeast today. And I have in the PowerPoint the differences between the 3 types of yeast and why we use instant versus active dry, etc. Instant yeast is very quick to purchase. It's usually called rapid rise in the supermarket. The only thing is you got to make sure that you actually don't manipulate the temperature of your liquid. So with instant yeast, you don't have to warm anything up, which is great. And technically you could actually put instant yeast in with all the dry ingredients, but I like to dissolve it in the water just to make sure that I don't have any pockets of yeast. Okay, so I'm putting in my water here, 12 ounces of water, just room temperature. And then I'm going to put in my pre-measured instant yeast. And I need to get that a little bit mixed up before I add in all my other things. So we're making a pretty standard focaccia dough today, but you could at home utilize different flours. You could make this a whole wheat version by 1/10 of the mixture being whole wheat flour instead. You could use spelt flour. There's a lot of options. You could do sourdough. I'm just going to use the dough hook and give it a quick mix so that it's pretty dissolved. Okay? This is, you're not trying to get it so that it looks homogeneous. You just want it so that the yeast starts to hydrate in that water. Now put the dough hook on here. Of course you can make this dough by hand, but I would like to show you how to do it with the mixer. So we're going to use our delicious extra virgin olive oil. So I want to put that in with the wet ingredients as well. And I pre-measured all of this stuff. So put that olive oil in there. Oh, there's a little pocket here. There we go. Okay, and then I have my flour and my salt. The reason why you don't want to add the salt to the yeast is actually it kind of deactivates the yeast. Okay, so we want to make sure that we add it along with the dry ingredients. Okay, now all I need to do is get this mixing. Make sure that my bowl is nice and tight. Get it on the knead setting. And I'm going to knead it until it is smooth and resilient. I'm not going to give you a time frame for this because it can change based on how you're doing it. Maybe you're mixing faster. Maybe you're mixing slower. Maybe you're doing it by hand. So you want to make sure that you utilize our 2 tests. Okay? When we are kneading, we're going to use the windowpane test, and I'll show you what that looks like. And we also want to utilize the poke test. There are 2 types of poke tests that I will talk to you about in the PowerPoint as well as mention it in the video. Okay? But if you want to take a look here, I have only after about 15 seconds or so, it's already come together really nicely. So come look. So about 10 minutes have elapsed with our mixer on knead mode. So if you're using another type of mixer, like KitchenAid for example, it'll probably be just on speed 1 or 2. And now it's time to check our dough. You want to make sure that you give the dough enough time for the gluten to develop. Okay? Now let's check to see if our gluten has developed. We're going to take a little bit of this dough and we're going to do the windowpane test. Okay? So what we want to do is very, very gently stretch it into a rectangle and to see if it is a nice thin, almost like a stained glass. Okay? So if you can stretch it like this and it doesn't break, you're in good shape. That is a proper window pane right there, okay? Usually it'll break at this point. So our dough is ready. Okay, stop. So now that our dough is ready, I'm going to put it in a lightly oiled bowl and to let it ferment. Now this step is called bulk fermentation. And in your PowerPoint, it talks about the different steps of bread baking. And bulk fermentation is one of the most important ones. So what kind of fat do you put in your bowl and how much? You only want to very lightly cover the bottom of the bowl. You don't want to douse it with oil. I've seen students really put too much. And you want to match the fat with the fat in the dough if there is a fat in the dough. We happen to have olive oil here, so this is perfect. So we'll put our dough into this bowl and we will let it do our bulk fermentation. Okay. And then I already talked to you about that poke test. So what I want to do is turn the dough over so that it gets oiled on both sides. And then I want to show you that when I poke the dough like that, you see that this poke is disappearing. Okay, that's what you want to see. You want to see this disappearing because that means the gluten has properly developed. If you poke it here and it just stays forever, then that means you need to develop the gluten longer. Okay, so we're going to let this sit until it has doubled in size, and I have a cool trick for how to tell if it has doubled in size. So we're going to get some plastic wrap. So we just cover the dough, and then we need to also label it properly. So with our marker, you want to draw a circle for this shape and size that the dough is currently. Okay, just a rough circle. And this kind of shows you where you started. Okay, you also want to put the time. So right now it is 1:30. So you can just keep track. So I'm going to come back to this in an hour and just see where I am. Now, where am I going to put this dough? I'm just going to leave it out at room temperature. It happens to be a cooler day today. That will affect the amount of time that is proofed or bulk fermented. So it might take a little longer than it normally does. What I would not recommend is to actually put it in the oven in the proofing setting if you're not sure how to do that. Okay, so I will show you a method for doing that when we do our second proof, but make sure that you are utilizing the right temperature to do that because you don't want to make it too hot in that environment. Okay, so we'll come back to this in an hour and see how it's doing. So now our dough has rested for 1 hour, and as you can see it has doubled in size, and definitely in height. So take a look at the dough, and I'm going to show you now we do the second part of the poke test. So in the second part of the poke test, after the dough has risen, then you take your finger and you poke it. Oh, let me do it with a little oil. You poke it and you see that the indentation stays. Okay, that little dot. Do it again so I can show you, see? So this dough is ready. Look how beautiful and billowy it is. So now we're going to degas, okay? So degas just means that you're just gonna punch it down. Okay, you're going to knock out all the air, and I know we just worked so hard to get that air, but we have to let it rise again a couple more times so that it can really develop the flavor and the right air pockets. So now we're going to transfer the dough to the tin that we're going to bake it in. So we'll take our fermented dough, and I happen to be putting it into a 9x13 pan. I really like how it looks and I like how it bakes in this pan. I've also baked it in two 8-inch cake pans before as well. I split it in half. You can do this one in a half sheet pan. So there's a lot of options here. So what I want to do is I want to bring it and kind of stretch it. Okay, so you see I'm lightly stretching the dough. Okay. You can also call this walking out the corners. So you just bring it from the center and you kind of pull it out. Bring it from the center and pull it out. Center, pull it out. And this pan, you should know, is already properly oiled with olive oil as well. Okay, so This is what the dough looks like now. I need to let it rest for another 30 minutes or so. I almost want it to double again, but not quite. And then I will put my toppings and my seasonings and we will bake it. So I'll see you in a little bit. So our dough has rested now for about 30 to 40 minutes. And as you can see, it has expanded again. It has not completely gone to the edges of all the pan, but that's totally okay. And now my favorite part is putting the garnishes and the seasoning. Maybe you noticed that this dough is a little light on the salt inside the dough recipe, and that's because we put kosher salt on the top to season it. So the cool thing about these garnishes is that you could do anything that you want. Just make it as luscious and delicious as possible. So today we're going to do some fresh chopped rosemary. I have some partially roasted tomatoes here, and I also have salt and pepper. So what I want to do is take the items and sprinkle them evenly over the top, and then I will dimple the dough. And I like to do it that way because then it kind of gets into the crevices of the dough, and I like the texture that it provides versus just doing it on the top after dimpling. Okay, so that's the rosemary, and then we have these partially roasted tomatoes. I just put these in the oven with some olive oil, salt, and pepper, maybe for about 20 minutes or so, and the fact that they're partially roasted will give them a more intense flavor once they're put into this. So if let's say, you know, the people at your house don't want to have it, oh, the oven's ready. They don't want to have it on all of the focaccia. You can just do half, but I happen to know that everyone loves this here. So focaccia is interesting. It's actually a cousin of pizza, and so the dough is a little bit puffier and it has different flavorings on top, but basically it's whatever you want to have in whatever flavors and kind of whatever texture too. So this happens to be a puffier focaccia recipe, and we really like this one. It's very easy, pretty foolproof. Students tend not to have too many issues with this one. Okay, so let's get the rest of these tomatoes on here instead of doing them individually. And you see all this juice that's left? I do not want to put any of this juice because any excess moisture here is not going to be good for the dough. Okay, so since I do have one clean hand, I'm going to dimple with one hand and then I can season with the other. So I'll dimple first. And you just want to really get your fingers in there and dimple. You don't want to do this lightly because this is going to give the dough that texture when it comes out of the oven. Okay, so don't be afraid to really dimple it. Okay, and now I'll take some kosher salt, and when you're seasoning anything, you want to season from up high so it's even. Okay, and then if you would like, you can also put some black pepper. So let me get my hand rinsed off and I'll do the black pepper. So now that my focaccia is all garnished up and my oven is ready, it's time to bake. Now how do you know when this is done? You can judge it by the color, but I would like you more so to judge it by the texture of the dough. See if when you tap it, you can hear that hollow sound. That's what you really want. And if you're really curious, you can also stick a thermometer in the dough too. Your finished dough should be about 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay.